Hello, and thank you so much for checking out this message from Ridgepoint. If you're watching or listening to this around the time that we're recording, this is a special time in the life of the church as we're ramping up and preparing to celebrate Easter. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus is really what Christianity is all about. This week and next week, Pastor Brent is telling the very familiar story of Jesus with some practical takeaways for all of us, regardless of where you're currently at in your own faith journey. Before we get to that message, here's one quick note. This Sunday in the church calendar is typically referred to as Palm Sunday. If you're not really sure what that means, or you could use a quick refresher, I encourage you to pull up Mark chapter 11 in your Bible. It's really a cool story and an important introduction to the Easter narrative, but we're actually not going to spend a whole lot of time there on today's message. This week and next is really all about Jesus and what his life means to us today. So, let me wish you a happy Palm Sunday, and now let's get to Pastor Brent for this week's message.
Good morning. So, I got a question. Do you know what an interrobang is? An interrobang. I-N-T-E-R-R-O-B-A-N-G. Interrobang. It is a legitimate punctuation mark that has an exclamation point with a question mark on top of it. So, you put an interrobang at the end of a sentence, and you could say, Jesus, or you could say, Jesus, right? He's alive? He's alive. You don't need two sentences, just one sentence with the interrobang at the end. Now you can check off your lifelong learner box for today. Like, check, you learned something, all right? The Easter story, like the death and resurrection, unapologetically, enthusiastically, it is a story with an exclamation point at the end, right? It's an exclamation, but all through the story, people are asking the question: is he dead? Is he alive? Can he forgive? And it's that question mark. And so we're going to today and next week tell the Easter story. Today, we're going to tell that story with an exclamation point at the end, but then I'm going to ask a question. What does this story say to Christians? Okay, now when I say the word Christian, I mean someone who has intentionally and personally reached out to Jesus and said, I need a Savior, I need forgiven, I declare my loyalty to you, I want to follow you. For those of us who have made that decision, we believed in the cross and the tomb, right? God has already done a work in us, right? He's saved us, he's forgiven us, he's made us righteous. But is Easter just past tense for Christians? Is that all the story does? Is it reminds us of what happened in the past? Or can we ask the question, what does the Easter story have to tell me today as a Christian? Now, next week, I'm going to tell the Easter story again, but on Easter weekend, on Saturday and Sunday morning here, I'm going to ask a different question at the end. What does this story say to those who have not yet believed? Those who are kicking the tires, who aren't sure what they believe. What does this Easter story say to them? So today, I want to start by telling you the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus. Now, we don't have exact times when the events of Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, from his Lord's Supper to his arrest, to his death, to his resurrection. We don't have like they didn't have watches back then. So they would never have thought of saying, hey, let's meet for lunch at 11:50. Like, they just had a sundial. And their best guess was, well, I'll meet you around noonday. Okay? But they didn't have, in that day, the loyalty to exact minutes and seconds like we do. But scholars have been able to piece together a reliable estimate of when things happen. So I just want to walk through the timeline of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this morning. What's come to be known as the Last Supper took place on a Thursday evening, reasonably a few hours long, 6 to 9 p.m. This meal that has come to be known as the Last Supper because it was the last meal that Jesus had with his disciples before he was arrested and crucified. This meal would have lasted a while. It was part of the Passover celebration. There were recitations and stories and scriptures that would be recited during the meal. There were some traditions around it. These disciples and Jesus had been hanging around each other 24/7 for 3 years. They were bonded, and they probably joked and talked and laughed. Jesus did some teaching during that time. That would have taken some time. He announced again his imminent death, that he would die. He would be arrested. He would be raised on the third day. He confronted Judas the betrayer and Peter the denier. And then during supper, he also interrupted the meal by going around and washing all the disciples' feet. So the meal likely lasted 3 hours. It's estimated that around 9 o'clock in the evening, Jesus and the disciples walked to the Garden of Gethsemane. It was an olive grove, maybe you could call it a city park, outside a quarter mile of the city of Jerusalem. Depending on where they ate supper in the city, like we don't know where that was at, getting the disciples and Jesus to wander through the streets at night, it likely took 20, 30 minutes for them to make that walk from the upper room through the city to the Garden of Gethsemane. As an aside, I wonder what the disciples talked about on the 30-minute-ish walk to the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, their heads had to be spinning, right? They had just been through this highlight every year's Passover celebration, the big meal, but everything had turned out differently with the feet washing, and Peter and Judas got called out in front of everybody, and his talk and about his imminent death. And so did they just walk in silence, or did they have little groups of 2 or 3 saying, is Peter really going to throw Jesus under the bus? Is that really, is Judas really? But they arrived at the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus knew that he was walking into an unimaginable time of emotional weight, watching the disciples abandon him, of physical torture, of the spiritual weight of not only the sins of the world hanging on him, but ontologically. That means he became sin, right? Because if the sin is just sitting on his shoulders and he dies, where's the sin? It just falls on the ground. But he became sin. And so when he died, our sin died. That's the wonder of it all. And he knew that was a torment beyond description spiritually. And so he looked at his disciples, and in Matthew 26:38, he said, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. I mean, Jesus was the Son of God, but he couldn't do this life alone. Like, he needed his Father. And now he looked at his disciples. He said, I need you. Like, I'm about to walk into hell. I need you to be there for me emotionally. I need you to be there for me spiritually. So stay awake and pray for me. And he goes off and he prays for an hour. And he comes back and finds them sleeping. He wakes them up and says, let's try that one again. And he goes back a second time to pray. asking God again to find another way for him to save the world. Jesus was saying, God, I really do want to do this save the world thing, but I don't want to do it by the cross. Can you find another way? But I'll do whatever you say. And he went back a second time and found him sleeping. And he says, can we do it? Can you just stay awake, please? And he walks off a third time to pray. He comes back. He wakes him up. He looks up and he sees Judas walking up. My betrayer has arrived. So Jesus was arrested, and over the next 4-ish hours, so we're talking up until around 5 in the morning, like this is all night, Jesus endured a sham of a trial. His interrogation started with the religious trial, where the Jewish leaders took him to Annas, who was the former high priest, and then they took him to Caiaphas, the current high priest. And there were false witnesses and all kinds of accusations. And of course, they found him guilty of blasphemy, right? He deserves death. They spit on him and beat him, but they did not have the authority to crucify him on a Roman cross. That would require a second trial, one that had the legitimacy of the stamp of Rome. So they took him to Governor Pilate, who bantered back and forth with the crowd. He heard the accusations. He interviewed, interrogated Jesus, and arrived at the conclusion that Jesus was innocent, certainly not deserving of any kind of death or crucifixion. And so he told this to the crowd. He said, I find this man not guilty. But by this time, the crowd had been whipped into a frenzy, near rioting, and they all just yelled back, crucify him, and Pilate buckled. By now, it's nearing dawn, and having decided to condemn Jesus to be crucified, Pilate released him to the Roman soldiers. And over the next 4 hours, do you get that? Over the next 4 hours, they beat him, they mocked him, they flogged him. And then was the walk to Golgotha, the place of the skull, the crucifixion site. And again, depending on where that beating and flogging and mocking took place, Jesus is now forced to carry the cross. He's depleted of all his physical energy, and he's stumbling again and again. That walk to Golgotha could have taken 30 minutes. They finally found another guy to help carry the cross. Jesus was nailed to the cross at 9 a.m. on Friday morning. And for 6 hours, he hung between heaven and earth. And at 3 o'clock, he breathed his last. And the Son of God died. The next 3 days, the rest of Friday, as Jews would call it a day, all of Saturday, and the early morning hours of Sunday leading to his resurrection. Over those 3 days, his followers lived in the fog of confusion. Is this surreal? Did this just happen? Is Jesus really dead? But I thought he was the Messiah. What do we do now? The grief, the confusion, the fear. They went after Jesus. Are we next? But for these 3 days, they wandered around in the fog. What they didn't know is that they were really just waiting for Sunday to come. And Sunday morning came. And I'd like to think that God rallied all the saints and angels in heaven, right? And he said, hey, everyone, come here, right here, okay? Like, we got to look down there. I don't want you to miss this. Like, something big is about to happen, right? And all of heaven watched. And Jesus is laying on that ledge inside that tomb. He's as dead can be. And it happens. He takes like a breath. He's laying there. And I think this next thing that happened, he had a smile on his face. And he whispers, we did it, Father. And he slings his no longer lifeless legs over that ledge. And he slings them over the edge, and he sits up. He stands up in the darkness of the tomb. He's alive. There's an earthquake. The stone miraculously rolls away. The soldiers that had been guarding, they fainted. And the light of the morning slammed through into that dark tomb. And the light of the world stepped out into a dark world. Now, we don't know what the first thing was that Jesus did. Did he punch the air? Say, we did it! Did he catch a glimpse of Satan lurking around in the shadows, who had just a moment earlier been gloating over his victory? Did Jesus go up to him and shake him by the collar and say, you are done? Throw him to the ground. Like, we don't know what Jesus did in those first moments when he walked out alive again. Did he go to find a secluded place? He just kneels. He doesn't even have to say anything. Like, we don't know what he did. But he was out of sight when three ladies walked up. Followers of Jesus. They see the stone rolled away. They're courageous enough to walk into the morgue, right? Jesus isn't on the ledge, but there's an angel in there. And the angel says, don't be afraid. I know who you're looking for. It's Jesus. I know that. The one who was crucified. And your eyes are not playing tricks with you. Your eyes are not deceiving you. He's not here. Jesus, he is alive. So now, I want you to go tell the disciples to meet him in Galilee. And that is the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus with an exclamation point. But there have always been questions, right? And we want to add a question to this Jesus. And the question is this. For Christians, is the Easter story just a past event? Or does it still speak to us today? So I've got three things I want to drop on you on that are just a start of the difference that Easter can still make in our lives, okay? So here's the first one. Jesus' death and resurrection should compel us to, here's the phrase I made up, day-changing gratitude, okay? It should compel us to being day-changing grateful. So Ephesians 5:20 says that we should thank God always for everything. Like, is the bar set high on that one? Yeah. Okay, and we'll leave the for everything for another sermon. But certainly within the everything is the death and resurrection. And so it says, Christians, we should always thank God, always, for his death and resurrection, right? And I think I'm at the front of the line for admitting that as thankful as I am for what Jesus did for me, there are days that go by that I don't say thank you. I mean, should Christians thank Jesus every day for saving them? Yeah. Like, that is an everyday thing. Always thankful. Okay? But it's not just being thankful for what he did. I call it day-changing gratitude. That there's a gratitude that we invite to step into our day that actually adjusts the trajectory of our day. Okay? In Habakkuk chapter 3, it says, even though the fig trees have no blossoms and there are no grapes on the vine. So it's a very agricultural, analogy. So put on your farmer hats or whatever. But even though the fig trees have no blossoms and there are no grapes on the vine, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty, here it is. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. Here's the deal. Our gratitude does not change the reality. Just because you say, thank you for saving me, thank you for Easter, it doesn't just miraculously put grapes back on the vine, okay? It doesn't just grow olives on the tree overnight. You've still got no grapes, no olives, no cattle. But what Habakkuk is doing, he's saying, I'm going to invite this day-changing gratitude to slip in right alongside my bad day. And my bad day is still bad. But I'm going to elevate my level of gratitude to at least change the trajectory of the day a bit, to make it a little more palatable. Because when you invite gratitude to slip right up next to your bad day and say, gratitude, I want you to lead my bad day. Bad day, I'm not going to let you lead my day, right? I want gratitude to lead, okay? It gives you courage. It helps you persevere. It helps you see the big picture and put things in perspective. Okay? I want you to repeat after me. I will commit to day-changing gratitude. And some of you just lied in church. Y'all just said, you didn't even know what you were going to say, right? But it is a hard thing. But I'm telling you, this is what the Easter story should continue to do for us. Give thanks always for everything, Ephesians 5:20. And a huge chunk of the everything is what Jesus did in the past. Give thanks always. Invite that gratitude to slip in right next to your bad day. I'm telling you, people, that's the right way to live. Okay? Here's the second way that the Easter story still speaks to Christians. Okay? Pay it forward. So someone pays for your meal in the drive-thru. So you pay it forward. You pay for someone else's, right? You heard the gospel. Now pay it forward. Okay? The Easter story should compel us to do that. So here are 4 ways to pay it forward from easiest to hardest, okay? Real quick. If you want the world to find out about Jesus, the easiest first step is pray. Just pray. Pray for your neighbors by name who don't know Christ. Pray for missionaries. Pray for entire countries. Like you pray for Ukraine, okay? Yeah, you don't just pray that the war will end. We need to pray for that. But you pray that people will find Jesus. You see, no one's going to stop you from praying. The only thing to stop you from praying for lost people is you. It's just you. It's me. Okay? But pray. The second easiest thing that we can do to help people find Jesus, for us to pay it forward, literally, is for you to give to the church. Now, don't go off, oh, there you are asking, church is always asking for money. Now, don't go there. We all know that money accomplishes good things. So give your money to the church because good things are going to happen. Joan and I have been giving money to church for our 38 years of marriage. And there are going to be hundreds of people in heaven because we gave. We don't even know their name. We'll meet them someday, and God will enlighten all of us, and they'll walk up and they'll tell Joan and me, thank you. Like, if you want to pay it forward literally, like pay it forward. Like give. Okay? Pray, give. Those are the easiest, and most Christians just want to stop there. But if you don't want to be a lazy Christian, you go to number 3 and 4. And we talked all last Sunday about being intentional in our influence of people. This is the same thing. Be kind and intentional in all your relationships. If you're not kind, they're not going to listen to you. If you're not intentional, you're not going to accomplish anything. So be kind in all your relationships. And know that you have a goal of paying the gospel forward into their lives. It's going to mean building trust and loyalty and friendship and starting a few conversations, but at some point we got to talk. You have to tell your story and Jesus' story. Okay? Repeat after me. I will pay it forward. This is what the Easter story is supposed to keep doing. It's not just past tense. All right, the last one. Genuine and joyful surrender and worship. Do you remember the story I just told you? The death and resurrection? That should stir something in the heart of a follower of Jesus. Like, it should compel you to surrender joyfully and to worship genuinely. Like it should do that, surrender. I mentioned this before, but a few years ago I was in Burundi and I was talking through translator with some Burundi pastors. They're in Africa. Unfortunately, they too often look up to the West and our brand of Christianity, and then, they're the ones down in the trenches, right? But they were asking me, what's the hardest part about being a pastor in America? And I told them the same hardest part about being a pastor in Burundi. Nothing's different. And they said, what's that? I said, convincing people to surrender. That's my job description. It's all I do. It's all I do. I try to convince people to surrender. And it's hard work because I have trouble convincing myself, right? Everything in us, it's our wiring as humanity. We want to call the shots. We want to make the decisions. We want to control our life. And so it takes everything in us to give up and surrender. But we're not surrendering to some enemy waving the white flag and they're going to do who knows what to us. We are surrendering to this Lord and King who did what he did. And he loves us. And he's going to do a lot better job of running our life than we ever could. But this story should compel us to surrender, and it should compel us to worship. The word for worship literally means to bow down. It's a physical posture word. The second meaning of worship in the Bible in the New Testament comes from 2 Greek words that mean to kiss the hand of, as a dog licks his master's hand. That's worship. So you're sitting on the couch and you got your hand hanging over the edge, and your dog walks up and sits down and looks up at you like you are king of the universe, right? And they lick your hand in allegiance. You've seen it. Movies. Someone walks into the throne room of the king, and they do this in front of the king. That's worship. And they are willing to take the hand of the king and kiss it, declaring him to be their master. That's worship. It's more than a song. It is a song, but it is an act of worship when you confess your sin. It's an act of worship when you do a kind deed. It's an act of worship when you forgive your enemy. Okay? Because these are acts that line up with this surrender and worship. And the Easter story should compel us to do that. Easter is not just a past event. 1 Chronicles 16:29 says, "Give to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness." This Easter story, day-changing gratitude, right? It should call us to paying it forward and call us to joyful and genuine surrender and worship. Father, from the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you. I kneel before you and I declare to you that I will seek to invite gratitude to slip right up next to my bad days, and I got a lot of them like everybody else. And I want gratitude for what you've done. I want it to change the trajectory of that day. And I continue to pledge to you that I will seek to pay the good news forward. I received it. I pass it on. Oh, give me courage, Father. And I kneel before you, surrendered in joyful worship. So accept our praise, Father. Accept our praise, Son. Accept our praise, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks again for watching or listening wherever you are today. As you've heard us say a few times by now, we would love to have you join us again next time as we celebrate Easter together. We'd love to have you join us in person, but we'll be live streaming and recording our Easter services as well. So make plans to join us however is most convenient for you. You can get all those details by visiting ridgepointwichita.com/Easter. And one more thing before you go, we are a larger church and we have a lot going on all the time, especially right now as we're in the middle of this massive building project. We have a bunch of events scheduled for all ages, and we also have important updates to share about our construction progress, and we want to make sure that you stay in the loop. So we invite you to sign up for our email newsletters. We have an all-church email that we send out every Thursday afternoon, but we also have specific emails that go out to parents of kids and students, as well as updates from our men's and women's ministries, prayer and mission trip opportunities, and even a few more. So we encourage you to sign up for any or all of those that might be helpful to you and your family. And that'd be a great next step if you're ready to start getting a little bit more plugged in around here. You can get the details and sign up for any of those newsletters by visiting ridgepointwichita.com/subscribe. Once again, thank you for making Ridgepoint part of your week. We hope to see you for the upcoming Easter and Good Friday services, but in the meantime, have a great week and reach out anytime if there's anything that we can do to help you find and follow Jesus.